I asked my son about his wedding, and his answer destroyed me. When Mara lifted her phone that afternoon, she expected the same warm conversation she had shared with her son Leo for years. Instead, his voice came filtered through noise and hurried breaths, and beside him, she heard his wife, Kira, whispering something sharp. Mara smiled softly anyway. "So, have you two settled on a wedding date yet? I'm excited to help prepare." The pause that followed felt long enough to age her. Then Kira spoke, not Leo. "Oh, that's already happened. Yesterday, actually. A small ceremony, just close people." Mara felt the world tilt. Her hand tightened around the phone until the plastic groaned. Close people? She had helped raise Leo alone after her husband died. She had paid their rent for nearly 3 years, furnished their apartment, covered groceries when they struggled, and even lent Kira money she never asked to be repaid. She thought she was family, real family. But yesterday, while the dress she had bought lay untouched in her closet, Kira's parents stood smiling in the wedding photos Leo never mentioned. Siblings toasted. Cousins posed. And Mara, the woman who had given so much, had been quietly erased. She ended the call with grace she did not feel, then sat alone in her quiet house, surrounded by the furniture she had once chosen for them, and let the truth sink in. She had been convenient, not cherished. The following week, her phone rang again. This time, Kira's voice trembled. "Mara, the rent is overdue. The landlord is threatening eviction. You forgot to transfer the money." Forgot? As if her life revolved around their calendar. As if she were an employee missing a shift. Mara breathed slowly. She remembered every rushed transfer, every cancelled doctor appointment, every meal skipped so she could stretch her budget to support them. She remembered doing it with love, because Leo was her son, her only child. But now, the woman who excluded her from the wedding was demanding money as though nothing had happened. "Kira," Mara answered calmly, "I'm only helping special people now." Silence. A heavy, unfamiliar silence from the other end. Mara could almost hear Kira calculating how to respond. "Mara. I don't understand," she finally stammered. "We've always been special to you." Once, Mara might have believed the lie. But the wedding had peeled away years of denial. All the polite excuses, the half-hearted hugs, the rare visits, they weren't signs of love. They were signs of dependency disguised as affection. Mara hung up and sat at her kitchen table, staring at the worn envelope containing the savings her late husband had left her. The money meant security for her final decades, meant peace, meant the life they never finished building together. She had spent nearly all of it keeping Leo comfortable. Not loved. Just comfortable. That night, Mara didn't cry from sorrow. She cried from rage. The kind that had been waiting years to be acknowledged. Rage at being used. Rage at confusing generosity with love. Rage at sacrificing her life while being treated like a background prop in theirs. By morning, her tears had dried into something colder. Something steadier. Resolve. She made coffee and drank it slowly, in silence, savoring the strange new sensation of not checking her phone for messages from Leo. For the first time in years, the morning belonged entirely to her. And what she decided next would change everything, more than even she realized. But as Mara would soon discover, deciding to reclaim her life was only the first step, because some people do not surrender their entitlement quietly. The following morning, Mara found herself standing outside the bank she had visited countless times on Leo's behalf. The glass doors reflected a woman she barely recognized, shoulders straighter, eyes steadier, breath measured. For years, she had walked in with urgency, fear, or guilt. Today, she walked in with purpose. Mr. Halden, the branch manager, looked up the moment she entered. "Mrs. Rowan, good morning. Another transfer?" "No," she said, surprising both him and herself with how firm her voice sounded. "I'm canceling all automatic payments. And I need information on securing my accounts." The manager blinked, then nodded. "Of course. We can take care of that," As he processed the cancellations, her phone repeatedly buzzed, first Leo, then Kira, then unknown numbers. The vibrations felt less like calls and more like tiny hands clawing at her independence. She silenced the phone and folded her hands neatly in her lap. "Mrs. Rowan," Mr. Halden said gently, "if you don't mind my saying, this seems like a big shift. Are you all right?" The kindness in his voice almost undid her. But she swallowed the lump rising in her throat. "I'm finally doing something I should have done years ago," she murmured. He nodded slowly, as though he had suspected something for a long while. "Then let's make sure everything is safe." By the time she left the bank, a weight she had carried for years had fallen away. She had not realized how heavy dependency felt, how suffocating, until the moment she stepped outside without it. But that relief lasted only minutes. 3 cars were parked in front of her house when she arrived. Leo's, Kira's, and a sleek black one she didn't recognize. Mara's pulse quickened. Someone was inside. She could see silhouettes moving from window to window. She tightened her grip on her purse. Not again. But she refused to let fear swallow the resolve she had only just claimed. Inside, she found Leo pacing. Kira stood rigid by the window. And a gray-haired man in an expensive suit sat at her dining table, going through her personal papers she never permitted to access. "What is happening here?" Mara asked, her voice low and dangerously controlled. All 3 looked up as though they were the ones being intruded upon. "Mum, good, you're home," Leo said. "We need to talk." Kira moved closer, her tone syrupy sweet. "We were worried about you. You haven't been acting like yourself." The lawyer rose smoothly. "Mrs. Rowan, I'm Mr. Greaves. Your children have consulted me regarding your recent, concerning behavior. They want to be sure you're safe." Safe. The word echoed like a threat. "And going through my private documents, does that make me safe?" Mara asked. Mr. Greaves offered a patronizing smile. "We're simply assessing whether you may need assistance managing your finances." There it was. The aim was not protection. It was controlled. "Mum," Leo sighed, "you cut us off with no explanation. You won't answer calls. You're doing odd things like installing locks and cameras." "I haven't installed anything," she interrupted sharply. "Well, we assumed you would." Kira shrugged. "You've seemed paranoid lately." Paranoid. It was a weaponized word, carefully chosen. The truth settled like ice in Mara's chest. They were preparing a case against her. And this was only the beginning. "I want all of you out," she said. "Now." Leo blinked. "Mum, you don't mean that." "I do," she replied, and for the first time, she did. Kira folded her arms. "We'll be back with legal documents. You're making this harder than it has to be." But Mara no longer trembled. She simply pointed at the door. One by one, they left. Not defeated, no, they carried themselves like people who believed they were still winning. But they had underestimated something important. Mara had finally chosen herself. Yet as Mara soon learned, cutting off support was only the spark. What followed would be a wildfire she never expected. After they left, Mara locked the door and pressed her back against it, breathing hard. The house was silent again, but not the peaceful silence she had begun to crave. This one pulsed with warning. She wasn't naive. Leo and Kira were not going to walk away quietly. People who depended on control rarely did. But she had no intention of backing down. She spent the rest of the day documenting everything: dates, conversations, the items they had rifled through, the unsolicited presence of their lawyer. She gathered bank statements showing the years of transfers. She photographed the disarray they had left behind. And the next morning, she visited an attorney who had handled her husband's will decades earlier, Ms. Hale, a sharp-eyed woman with silver hair and a calm, steel-like confidence. "Mara," she said after listening to the full story, "what you're dealing with is financial exploitation. This is more common than many imagine. but the law is very clear. Your rights are intact. We will protect them." A tremor of relief loosened Mara's shoulders. "Do you think they'll escalate?" "They already have," Miss Hale replied. "Forced entry, reviewing your documents, bringing in a lawyer, it's a coordinated effort. Next, they might attempt a wellness complaint or file for guardianship. We need to be ahead of them." Guardianship. The word hit like a physical blow. The idea of Leo, or worse, Kira, controlling her finances, her home, her life, it chilled her. "What do I need to do?" Mara asked. "3 things," Miss Hale said, ticking them off with practiced precision. "Secure your property. Document all harassment. And undergo an independent mental health evaluation, voluntary, on your terms, not because you need it, but because they will try to claim otherwise." Mara nodded slowly. "I understand." After the meeting, she visited a hardware store and spoke with a young technician about security systems. Cameras. Door alarms. Smart locks. It felt strange preparing her home not against burglars, but against her own son. Yet it didn't hurt anymore. It simply felt necessary. "I'll install everything tomorrow, ma'am," the technician promised. "You'll be fully protected." When she returned home, she found several missed calls from unknown numbers. She ignored them and spent the evening gardening, something she had abandoned long ago. Soil under her fingertips, the smell of lavender and mint, the quiet hum of bees, all of it grounded her in a way she hadn't experienced in years. For the first time in her adult life, she felt like her time actually belonged to her. But peaceful moments never last long these days. The next morning, as she watered her newly revived plants, her doorbell rang. Her heart tightened. She checked the just-installed camera feed on her phone. A woman stood at her door, well-dressed, holding a clipboard, and wearing an official badge. "Good morning, Mrs. Rowan," the woman said when Mara opened the door. "I'm a social investigator from the Department of Senior Welfare. We received a report that you may be experiencing cognitive decline and financial confusion. I need to conduct a wellness check." Mara's stomach twisted. It had begun, the next phase Miss Hale predicted. The woman smiled politely, but her eyes flicked past Mara into the house, cataloging everything. "May I come in?" she asked. Mara inhaled. She remembered Miss Hale's warning, always insist on representation. "I will allow it," Mara said calmly, "but only when my attorney is present." The investigator blinked, surprised. "That's not necessary." "It is," Mara replied. She stepped back, not to invite her in, but to reach for her phone. Because Mara had no idea that this wellness check was only the opening move in a much larger, calculated attack. Mara dialed Miss Hale immediately, holding the phone tightly enough for her knuckles to whiten. The social investigator waited on the porch with a professional but impatient smile. "Put me on speaker," Miss Hale instructed the moment she answered. Mara complied. "This is Attorney Hale," she announced sharply. "Before any wellness check proceeds, I need to confirm whether you have a court order authorizing entry." The investigator's expression faltered. "Well, we don't need a court order for a preliminary assessment. We received credible concerns from family members with a financial conflict of interest," Miss Hale countered. "My client is not to answer questions until I'm present." The investigator hesitated, visibly recalculating. "Very well. I'll return in an hour." When she left, Mara stepped inside and locked the door. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears, but her hands weren't shaking. Not like before. As promised, Miss Hale arrived within the hour. Together, they welcomed the investigator into the living room. The woman sat upright, pen poised, voice coated with bureaucratic sympathy. "Mrs. Rowan, we received claims that you've been isolating yourself, acting unpredictably, and showing signs of impaired judgment. We need to ensure you're safe." Ms. Hale responded before Mara could. "Please list the specific behaviors." The investigator glanced at her notes. "Rapid financial changes. Canceling long-standing payments. blocking communication with family, installing unnecessary security systems. Mara felt heat rise inside her, not embarrassment, but indignation. "Let me explain," she said calmly. "I instituted financial boundaries because my son and daughter-in-law depended on me far beyond what is normal. I discontinued payments because they were draining my retirement. I blocked communication because they broke into my home without permission. And I installed security because I feared further intrusion." The investigator blinked, taken aback by her clarity. Ms. Hale slid a folder across the table. "Here is evidence of 3 years of financial exploitation. Bank records, withdrawal history, statements from neighbors who witnessed the confrontations, and documentation showing forced entry. And here," she added, placing another paper on top, "is a voluntary cognitive assessment from a licensed psychiatrist, conducted last week. It reflects outstanding mental health for her age." The investigator flipped through the results. Her posture softened. "I see," she murmured. "This paints a very different picture from the complaint." "It should," Ms. Hale replied dryly. "My client is mentally sound. The ones acting irrationally are the individuals trying to control her finances." The investigator closed her folder. "Mrs. Rowan, based on what I've seen today, I have no reason to proceed with intervention. I'll be closing this case." When she left, Mara exhaled so deeply she surprised herself. She hadn't realized how much tension had built inside her until it poured out in a single breath. "Miss Hale," she said softly, "thank you." "You're not done yet," the attorney warned gently. "This was only a probe. If they filed this complaint, I assure you, they're preparing something larger." Mara nodded. She knew exactly what that something was. Guardianship. The thought alone could empty the color from her world. But instead of fear, she felt a strange steadiness settle inside her. She had support. She had proof. And she had a strength she didn't know existed. Later that evening, she invited her neighbor, Mrs. Alden, over for tea. Mara recounted everything, every lie, every confrontation, every attempt to paint her as unstable. Mrs. Alden listened with a grave nod. "They're cornered," she said. "People lash out most violently when their control slips." Mara looked at the steam curling from her teacup. "Yes," she whispered. "And I think the storm is about to break." And Mara was right. Because the next letter that arrived wasn't a phone call, a visit, or a warning. It was a lawsuit. 2 weeks passed in a fragile calm. Mara filled her days with long walks, quiet meals, and small freedoms she had forgotten she was allowed to enjoy. She tended her garden each morning, painted in the afternoons, and drank tea on the porch at dusk, watching the sky soften into lavender. But although her home was peaceful, her instincts were not. She could feel a shift in the air, like the heaviness before a storm. Leo and Kira had gone silent, but not defeated. Silence, from people like them, meant strategy. And then it arrived. On a Monday morning, Mara opened her mailbox to find an envelope with the emblem of the county court stamped on the corner. Her throat tightened. She knew instantly what it was, even before she tore it open. A petition for legal guardianship. Her son was asking the court to strip her of her autonomy, financial, legal, and personal. Her hands trembled for the first time in weeks. The petition claimed she was forgetful, confused, easily manipulated, and unable to make sound financial decisions. It included statements from 3 individuals: Kira, a neighbor across the street known for his nosiness, and a pharmacist who had clearly been misled into signing something he didn't fully understand. Mara's voice broke the stillness of the kitchen. Of course, they would go this far. She immediately phoned Ms. Hale. "Bring everything to my office," the attorney said. "We begin preparing the defense today." Mara gathered the documents, her heart racing. It was surreal, her own son failing to take control of her life, as though she were a stranger unfit to decide when to wake, what to eat, or how to spend her own money. At Ms. Hale's office, the attorney read the petition with narrowed eyes. "This is aggressive," she said finally. And calculated. They're trying to overwhelm the court with fabricated concern. Can they win? Mara whispered. Miss Hale leaned back in her chair. Not if we dismantle every lie they've built. And we will. They spent the next hours assembling the facts. Her voluntary psychiatric evaluation. Documentation of the forced entry. Evidence of long-term financial exploitation. Written statements from neighbors who had seen the confrontations. Bank history showing decades of stable management. Photographs of her home, well kept and lived in. A detailed timeline of her decision-making. For the first time, Mara realized how much strength she had gathered in the past weeks. She wasn't just defending herself, she was exposing years of manipulation that she had quietly endured. You'll need to testify, Miss Hale said gently. Are you prepared for that? Mara swallowed, then nodded. Yes. I am. Good. Because this hearing will be the battleground. They'll try to portray you as confused and fragile. But we're going to show the truth. As Mara left the office, the sun peeked between the clouds, warm on her face. And for a moment she wondered what her husband, Thomas, would have said if he could see her now. Perhaps he would have held her hand and told her she was stronger than she believed. She hoped he would be proud. That evening, her neighbor Mrs. Alden stopped by with a casserole and a stern look. I heard, she said. You're not alone in this. We'll testify. All of us. Anyone who's met you in the past month knows you're perfectly capable. Mara felt her eyes sting. Support, real support, felt foreign, but deeply comforting. She spent that night reviewing documents, writing notes, and preparing herself. Every page she touched reminded her of the truth. She was not the fragile woman Leo and Kira tried to portray. She was determined. Steady. And ready. But the storm was only beginning. Because when the first court date arrived, Mara discovered that Leo and Kira had prepared more than lies. They had brought an entire strategy designed to destroy her credibility. The courthouse was colder than Mara expected, emotionally, physically, symbolically. The walls were pale, the benches stiff, and everything seemed designed to make people feel small. But Mara walked in with steady steps, wearing a charcoal suit she hadn't touched in years. She had ironed it the night before, smoothing out not just wrinkles but fear. Miss Hale met her at the entrance. Take a breath, she said softly. We've prepared thoroughly. Remember, you don't have to prove anything. They do. Mara nodded, though her chest fluttered like a bird trapped in a cage. She knew Leo and Kira would be inside. She wasn't sure how she would react to seeing them again. The moment she entered the courtroom, she found out. Leo sat stiffly at the petitioner's table, wearing a new jacket that didn't match his expression. His eyes darted away when Mara looked at him. Kira, beside him, wore a somber black dress as though she were attending a funeral. In a way, perhaps she thought she was, mourning the loss of the money she once controlled. Their attorney, Mr. Calder, rose with a confident nod. He looked like a man who had done this before, and succeeded. The judge, a gray-haired man with calm but keen eyes, reviewed the file. Are both parties ready to begin? Yes, Your Honor, Miss Hale answered. Yes, Your Honor, Mr. Calder echoed. Mr. Calder spoke first. We are here out of concern for Mrs. Rowan's mental well-being. My clients have observed increasing confusion, erratic behavior, and difficulty managing daily responsibilities. They love her dearly and fear she is vulnerable to manipulation. Mara's jaw tightened, but she remained silent. Then it began, a deliberate, polished performance. Kira was the first witness. She spoke with measured trembling, hands clasped dramatically. Mara, she used to be warm. Kind. But recently she's withdrawn. She shuts her door, refuses calls, becomes defensive. She cancelled rent payments she made for years. She even accused us of stealing from her, which is absurd. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Theatrics. All of it. Miss Hale rose slowly. Mrs. Rowan accused you of entering her home without permission, did she not? It was a misunderstanding, Kira insisted. We walked in because we were worried. Did she invite you? A pause. No, but we had keys. Keys she gave you for emergencies, Miss Hale pressed. Isn't that correct? Kira's silence was as telling as any confession. Next came Leo. Seeing her son sworn in and preparing to lie under oath was like watching a childhood photograph dissolve in fire. Mum has changed, he said quietly. She's distant. She thinks people are trying to take advantage of her. She refuses to get evaluated. Ms. Hale stood. Mr. Rowan, how many times in the past year have you called your mother without asking for money? Leo hesitated. That's irrelevant. It is entirely relevant, the judge interjected. Leo's jaw tightened. I don't remember. Is it true you asked her to sign legal documents granting you full control of her finances? We were trying to help her. Did you break into her home? We entered because. Yes or no? Leo's voice cracked. Yes. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Then it was Mara's turn. When she stood at the witness stand, she felt a tremble in her knees, but her voice, when she spoke, was clear. I am not declining, she said. I am awakening. For years, I gave everything I had to support my son. Not because he asked sweetly, but because I believed love meant sacrifice. I confused generosity with affection. But setting boundaries isn't confusing. It's finally seeing the truth. Miss Hale guided her through every detail. Her testimony was steady, measured, and logical. With each sentence, she felt strength anchor deeper into her bones. When she finished, even the judge seemed moved. But the hearing wasn't over. Mr. Calder rose again, eyes sharp. Mrs. Rowan, you claim clarity. But tell me, have you not been influenced by new acquaintances, people who suddenly appeared in your life? He was going to try to paint her as manipulated. Controlled. Vulnerable. Mara inhaled softly. Because the next question he asked was designed to unravel her entire defense, and for a moment, the courtroom held its breath as Mara prepared to answer. Mr. Calder stepped closer to the witness stand, his polished shoes reflecting the courtroom lights. He held a folder loosely in one hand, but his posture carried the confidence of someone who believed victory was already within reach. Mrs. Rowan, he said with deliberate calm, you claim you are perfectly capable of independent decision-making. Yet, within the span of 2 weeks, you altered your entire financial life, blocked all communication with your family, and installed extensive security systems. He tilted his head. Does that sound like the behavior of a stable individual? A hush fell over the room. Mara folded her hands, steady despite the tension tightening her ribs. It sounds like the behavior of a woman exercising boundaries no one ever allowed her to have. Mr. Calder's expression thinned. But these changes coincided with your sudden close involvement with a new neighbor. Mrs. Alden. He flipped open the folder. Is it not true that Mrs. Alden began visiting you daily? That she accompanied you during financial decisions? That she introduced you to new acquaintances? There it was, the angle he had been saving. Turn support into manipulation. Turn friendship into exploitation. Mara, Miss Hale whispered, wait for his full question. Mr. Calder continued, could it not be possible, perhaps even likely, that you are being influenced? That these new individuals filled your mind with suspicion, convincing you that your loving son and daughter-in-law were enemies? He stepped back, letting the implication hang in the air like smoke. The judge shifted attentively. Mara exhaled slowly. And then, with calm dignity, she answered. Mr. Calder, for nearly a decade, my world consisted only of my son and his wife. Their needs. Their emergencies. Their crises. I gave up friendships, hobbies, even contact with extended family so I could be available to them. She paused, her voice neither loud nor trembling. They isolated me long before Mrs. Alden ever knocked on my door. A faint murmur rippled through the courtroom. I began meeting new people because I was finally allowed the space to do so, she continued. These are individuals who came into my life with no expectations, no demands, and no financial dependence. They never asked for anything but conversation. She looked directly at the attorney. If kindness is now considered undue influence, then perhaps the problem is not my stability, but the environment I lived in before. Even the judge seemed to consider this. Mr. Calder regained his footing. Mrs. Rowan, please answer directly. Did anyone instruct you to cut off your son? No, Mara replied. I made that decision alone. A decision I should have made years ago. He narrowed his eyes. Did anyone tell you that your family was manipulating you? No one had to, she said. Their actions revealed themselves. A subtle shift occurred, jurors leaning forward, the judge's brow creasing, the once confident attorney recalculating his strategy. It was clear, Mara was not unraveling. She was unraveling them. Mr. Calder adjusted his glasses. No further questions. When Mara returned to her seat beside Miss Hale, she felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and triumph. She had stood against the people she once believed she would protect until her last breath. And she had done so without crumbling. But the hearing was not finished. Miss Hale stood to deliver her closing argument. Her voice was measured, crisp, and devastating. Your Honor, everything presented today points to one truth. This is not a case about incapacity. It is a case about dependence, theirs, not hers. On the opposite side of the courtroom, Kira's jaw tightened. Leo stared at the floor, jaw clenched. When Ms. Hale finished, the judge called for a recess, excusing himself to review the evidence. Mara exhaled deeply, relieved for a moment of stillness. But the peace was short-lived. Because when she stepped out into the hallway during the recess, she found Leo waiting for her, alone, tense, and wearing an expression she hadn't seen since he was a child. No remorse. Not love. Something far more dangerous. He took a step toward her, and the words he whispered next would change everything, even before the judge delivered his ruling. The hallway outside the courtroom was quiet, so quiet that Mara could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. She walked toward a bench to sit for a moment, but Leo stepped in front of her, blocking her path. He looked older than she remembered. Not in years, but in strain. Mum, he said, voice low, please, just stop all this. Mara held her ground. Leo, the court will decide the truth. Not you. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. You're letting strangers turn you against your own family. You think these new people care about you? You think your lawyer cares? She does, Mara replied. More than you have in a long time. His jaw tightened. You're ruining everything. Everything? She asked, her tone steady. Or everything you benefited from? Leo looked away. For a long moment, he said nothing. When he finally spoke, his voice was brittle, cracking. I depended on you. All right? Are you happy to hear that? I depended on you because I had no one else. You had Kira, Mara said quietly. He laughed, a sad, hollow sound. Kira only stays because she thinks I can provide. And I only provided because you made it possible. Mara's breath caught. She had known they relied on her financially, but the depth of it, the emotional grip, was more tangled than she imagined. Leo, she said softly, I never wanted to abandon you. But I was never meant to be your lifeline forever. He stepped closer, desperation replacing defiance. If I lose this case, Kira will leave. I'll lose my home. My car. Everything. And that, Mara replied, is the problem. Your stability shouldn't depend on my downfall. For a moment, Leo's anger faded, revealing something rawer, fear. He whispered, I don't know how to live without your help. Mara felt the word strike deep. Her mother's heart wanted to reach out, to cradle him like she did when he was small. But she also saw the man he had become, someone who would sacrifice her freedom to secure his comfort. "You're an adult, Leo," she said gently. "You can learn. You must." His face hardened instantly. "If the judge rules against me, don't expect me to come back. This will be the last time you ever hear from me." A cold ache spread through her chest, but she refused to let it fold her. "That is your choice," Mara said. "Not mine." Just then, the courtroom door opened. A clerk called everyone back inside. Leo stepped away, shoulders tense, eyes burning. "I hope you're proud of what you've done," he muttered. "I'm proud," she said softly, "that I finally protected myself." They returned to the courtroom, each carrying their own storm. When the judge entered, the air shifted. Everyone stood. The judge reviewed the notes, his expression unreadable. After considering all testimony and evidence, he began, "This court finds that Mrs. Rowan retains full mental capacity and independence. The petition for guardianship is..." Kira squeezed Leo's arm, eyes wide. "Denied." Mara didn't even breathe. She simply closed her eyes, letting the weight wash away. Miss Hale touched her hand gently, a silent reassurance that she had truly won. But the judge wasn't finished. In addition, given the concerning evidence of harassment and financial pressure, the court strongly advises Mrs. Rowan to consider a restraining order should further interference occur. Gasps scattered through the room. Leo's face was drained of color. Kira looked as though she had swallowed poison. The gavel struck once. The case was closed. Mara stood, legs trembling. It was over. Or so she believed. Because when she walked out of that courthouse, the confrontation she feared most, a final reckoning she could no longer avoid, was waiting just outside the doors. The courthouse steps were bathed in late afternoon light, warm and golden. Yet the air around Mara felt tense, charged. The moment she stepped outside, she saw them, Leo and Kira, standing off to the side, stiff as statues. Miss Hale placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "You don't owe them a conversation," she murmured. "I know," Mara replied quietly. "But I think I'm ready for one." She walked toward them, and for a moment the sounds of the bustling street faded, replaced by the hollow quiet of strained family ties. Kira spoke first, voice sharp. "You humiliated us." Mara didn't flinch. "You put me on trial." Leo stepped forward, his expression withdrawn, almost defeated. "You really think we were trying to hurt you?" "I think," Mara said carefully, "that you both acted out of fear and greed. Maybe not intentionally at first. But that doesn't make the damage less real." Kira crossed her arms tightly. "We were looking out for you." "No," Mara corrected, "you were looking out for what I provided." For a long moment, Leo simply stared at her, eyes tired, hollow. "You could have talked to me," he whispered. "You never even tried." Mara's heart squeezed. "I tried for years, Leo. Every time I said no and you pushed harder. Every time I asked for space and you showed up anyway. Every time you treat my money like your safety net." She paused. "You didn't want a discussion. You wanted control." Leo's eyes glistened for the briefest moment before he blinked the emotion away. "So that's it, then? You're cutting us out?" "I'm giving myself a life," she replied softly. "One where I'm not drained. One where I'm respected. One where decisions about my home, my finances, and my well-being belong to me." Kira scoffed. "Good luck with that. Let's see how long your new friends stick around." Miss Hale stepped beside Mara. "Mrs. Rowan has plenty of support," she said firmly. "And she is more than capable on her own." Kira's gaze flicked over the attorney with cold disdain. Then she took Leo's arm. "We're done here." But Leo didn't move. He stared at his mother for a long time. "I don't know how to fix any of this." Mara felt a sting behind her eyes. The child in him was still there, hidden beneath years of dependence and resentment. "You start," she said gently, "by fixing yourself. Leo swallowed hard. I don't know if I can. You can, she whispered, but not by leaning on me. Not anymore. He nodded slowly, whether in acceptance or defeat, she couldn't tell. Then he turned and walked away. Kira followed, leaving without looking back. Only when they disappeared into the parking lot did Mara release the breath she had been holding. Miss Hale touched her elbow. You handled that with grace. I didn't feel graceful, Mara admitted. Just tired. That's what happens after you reclaim your life, the attorney said softly. It's exhausting. And freeing. Later that evening, Mara returned home to find Mrs. Alden waiting on the porch with 2 mugs of tea. You survived the storm, her neighbor said warmly. Mara sat beside her, letting the warm ceramic soothe her palms. It doesn't feel like a victory. Not yet. It will, Mrs. Alden said. You've opened a door that was locked for years. Now you get to step through it. For the first time, Mara allowed herself to imagine what the other side of that door looked like. Sunlight, quiet mornings, laughter that wasn't laced with obligation, friendships untainted by expectation. Freedom. And beyond it, something even more precious, peace. Yet before that peace could settle, one final message arrived, a message that would force Mara to confront the last piece of her past she had not yet laid to rest. Some storms don't destroy you. They clear the path you were meant to walk. Mara lost the very people she once protected. But she gained something far more powerful, her voice, her freedom, her life. And sometimes, letting go is the most painful act of love. If this story touched you, hit subscribe, leave a comment below, and share your thoughts. Because thousands of families are facing the same silent battle. What would you do if the people you love tried to take your life away from you?